He's been meeting someone named Vanessa for months, I whispered, sliding the folder across the table to my husband's pale-faced parents. And there are others too. Jessica and Lauren, at least that I know of. The elegant garden party continued around us in blissful ignorance. Champagne glasses clinked laughter, bubbled, and colorful decorations swayed in the gentle Chicago breeze. Our baby shower, meticulously planned down to the hand-folded paper cranes suspended from the pergola, had transformed in an instant from celebration to reckoning. Marcus's face drained of color as his fingers trembled over the stack of documents I'd placed before him. His best friend, David, took an instinctive step backward, nearly colliding with a waiter carrying a tray of appetizers. David's wife, Sarah, grabbed his arm with surprising force, her eyes darting between him and the folder with sudden suspicion. Ava, this isn't the time." Marcus started, his voice barely audible over the string quartet in the corner of the garden. "Actually," I said, smoothing my silk maternity dress over my 7-month belly, where our son kicked furiously, "this is exactly the right time. Everyone you care about is here to witness it." I turned to address our gathered guests with a smile that felt surprisingly genuine. "Thank you all for joining us today. Since we're celebrating new beginnings, I thought we should clear away some endings first. 3 months earlier, I was working late at Summit Creative finalizing a pitch for our biggest client of the year. As creative director, I'd poured weeks into this presentation, determined to land the account that would secure my position before taking maternity leave. After losing our first pregnancy at 5 months the previous year, a devastating experience that required weeks of physical and emotional recovery, this baby boy felt like a miracle, one I was fiercely protecting while refusing to sideline my career. My doctor had placed me on a modified work schedule with regular monitoring, but I was still determined to maintain my professional responsibilities. The loss of our first child had affected Marcus deeply too, though he processed his grief differently. He'd thrown himself even more intensely into his work at Midwest Financial, where he'd recently been promoted to senior investment manager. What I'd initially read as dedication to our future, I now wondered if it had been withdrawal. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Working late again. Don't wait up." I sighed, rubbing my lower back. This had become our new normal, ships passing in the night, both consumed by our respective careers. Marcus's position demanded long hours, frequent business dinners, and occasional weekend retreats. I'd accepted it as part of our ambitious lives, especially as we prepared for the financial demands of parenthood. The days when he'd come home early to make dinner together, or surprise me with weekend getaways, seemed like distant memories from another relationship entirely. It was past 10 when I finally called a rideshare home. My pregnant body was too exhausted for the 15-minute walk I used to enjoy. Our brownstone in Lincoln Park sat dark except for the porch light we'd purchased it 2 years ago, combining my savings from a significant advertising award and Marcus's year-end bonus. For me, it represented the stability I'd worked so hard to achieve after growing up with a single mother who moved us frequently. Confirming Marcus wasn't home yet, I kicked off my shoes, heated some leftovers, and settled at our kitchen island with Marcus's iPad to review some reference material he'd downloaded for the nursery renovations. A notification slid across the top of the screen. "HeartSync Vanessa has sent you a message." I froze fork, suspended halfway to my mouth. HeartSync, the dating app that had exploded in popularity over the past year, marketed for meaningful connections. The notification disappeared before I could process it fully. Surely there was an explanation. An old account Marcus had forgotten to delete. Spam, something innocent. But my stomach knotted as I recalled the increasing late nights, the business trips that seemed to multiply the distracted kisses and the growing distance between us. Even as my body created new life, I placed my fork down, slowly, appetite gone. Rather than clicking on the app immediately, I took a deep breath and considered my options. Marcus and I had been together for 7 years, married for 4. We'd weathered career changes, a cross-country move from Boston to Chicago, and the loss of our first child. Now 6 months into my second pregnancy, I was facing what felt like betrayal at the most vulnerable time. That night, I lay awake beside my sleeping husband, listening to his steady breathing while planning my next move. I wouldn't confront him immediately. That would only result in partial truths, defensiveness, gaslighting. I needed more information, more evidence. Most importantly, I needed to protect myself and my son. The next morning, I called the one person I knew would help without judgment. Jade, I need to meet you today, and I need a recommendation for the best digital forensic specialist in Chicago. My college roommate and now corporate attorney didn't ask questions over the phone. Lakefront Coffee House, noon. I'll bring what you need. I spent the morning at work, smiling through team meetings and client calls, with a newfound ability to compartmentalize. By noon, I sat across from Jade at a corner table in the rustic coffee shop, steam rising from untouched mugs between us. "Holy shit, Ava," Jade whispered after I explained what I'd found. Her normally composed legal persona cracked with genuine shock. The entire pregnancy, while you're carrying his child. Apparently, the prospect of fatherhood sent him looking for escape hatches. I said, surprised at my own bitter tone. After we lost the first baby, something changed. I thought it was just grief, but now I wonder if he saw it as a reprieve. Jade's dark eyes narrowed. We'd been through everything together, from cramming for finals to my mother's funeral 3 years ago. She'd been my witness when Marcus and I eloped to the courthouse, claiming we wanted simplicity, while his parents pushed for an elaborate Boston society wedding. "What do you want to do?" she asked, shifting into problem-solving mode. "I want to know everything," I replied. "The full scope, the timeline, the women I need to understand what I'm dealing with before I decide how to respond." Jade nodded, sliding a business card across the table. "Michael Chen, former FBI cybersecurity, now private sector, expensive but discreet. If there's a digital trail, he'll find it. He works within legal boundaries, only accessing accounts you have authorized access to, but he's thorough. Money isn't an issue." I said, "I have my own accounts." Years of my mother's warnings about financial independence echoed in my head, her own divorce having taught her valuable lessons she'd passed to me. My recent success in landing major accounts for Summit Creative had resulted in substantial bonuses I'd kept separate from our joint finances. "And legally?" Jade asked. "Not yet." I said, "I need facts first, then strategy." My hand rested protectively over my belly. This boy deserves a mother who makes decisions from strength, not reaction. Jade nodded, then hesitated. "And Sarah and David, should I give them any heads up? They're having dinner with us next weekend." David Wright and Marcus had been inseparable since their undergraduate days at Northwestern. David had been the one to introduce me to Marcus at a charity event 6 years ago. His wife, Sarah, had quickly become one of my closest friends in Chicago, our weekly yoga sessions providing an anchor during my first difficult year in a new city. Act normal. I decided, I don't know how deep this goes or who else knows what. Michael Chen operated from a converted loft in the West Loop. With his meticulous grooming and casual yet expensive attire, he looked more like a tech CEO than an investigator. His office was minimalist, except for an impressive array of monitors and equipment. "Mrs. Carter," he greeted me, not rising from his ergonomic chair. "Ms. Ramirez explained your situation? Digital infidelity investigations are unfortunately common in my practice. I need more than just confirmation." I explained, "I need comprehensive evidence, dates, locations, communications, financial records. Everything that can be legally obtained with my authorized access." Michael nodded approvingly. "The 3 areas of exposure: digital footprint, financial trail, physical movements. With your authorization to access shared accounts and devices, I can map most of it within 2 weeks. I provided the necessary permissions along with every detail I could remember that might provide investigative leads, trips late nights, unexplained expenses. I also signed forms acknowledging the legal limitations of the investigation. I only work within legal parameters. Michael explained, that means accounts where you're an authorized user, devices you jointly own, and information that's publicly available. Anything requiring credentials you don't have access to is off limits. As I prepared to leave, Michael stopped me with a gentle observation. Mrs. Carter, in my experience, people rarely stray in isolation. If your husband has hidden relationships, there may be other secrets, financial, professional, personal. Should I expand the scope to include those areas? Something in his tone suggested he'd seen this pattern before. I hesitated only briefly. Yes, whatever you find, I need to know. The following weeks became an exercise in controlled deception. I maintained our normal routine, managing my team at work, attending prenatal appointments, which Marcus increasingly missed due to urgent client meetings, and planning the upcoming baby shower with my sister Emma and mother-in-law Eleanor, who had flown in from Boston to help. Eleanor Carter embodied East Coast old money, understated elegance, perfect manners, and an iron will beneath her cashmere sweaters. She'd initially been cool toward me, the career-focused marketing executive from a modest Midwest background who'd captured her son's heart, but had warmed considerably once I became pregnant with her first grandchild. Have you and Marcus selected a name yet? Eleanor asked one afternoon as we reviewed floral arrangements for the shower. The Carter family has several traditional options. I smiled tightly, trying not to flinch as my phone buzzed with another encrypted update from Michael. We're still discussing it. Marcus is leaning toward William after his father. Eleanor beamed, unaware that my world was fracturing beneath the surface. Michael's updates arrived in encrypted emails, breadcrumbs forming a trail of betrayal far more extensive than I'd initially discovered. The HeartSync app was just the beginning. Marcus maintained multiple dating profiles across different platforms, each with subtle variations of his persona. He'd become expert at compartmentalizing his digital life, using a separate phone and private browsing modes that explained why I'd never noticed suspicious activity before. Financial records revealed hotel charges, expensive dinners, and gifts disguised as client expenses. His location history showed patterns of visits to upscale hotels and residential addresses that correlated with absences from home. Most active was his relationship with Vanessa Thompson, a 28-year-old pharmaceutical sales representative he'd been seeing consistently for the past 5 months. Their communications had begun casually but intensified shortly after my 12-week pregnancy announcement. Then there were 2 others, Jessica, a colleague at his firm, and Lauren, a woman he'd met at a finance conference. But the most shocking discovery came 4 weeks into the investigation. Michael requested an urgent meeting at his office rather than sending his usual detailed report. Mrs. Carter, he began carefully. My financial investigation uncovered something beyond the scope of infidelity. He turned his monitor toward me, displaying a complex web of transactions flowing between various accounts. Your husband has been systematically diverting funds from joint investment accounts into offshore holdings under a shell company named Phoenix Ventures. The pattern suggests preparation for significant asset concealment. My throat tightened. He's planning to leave. Michael nodded grimly. The timing of these transfers correlates with the progression of your pregnancy. They accelerated in the past month, suggesting an approaching timeline. After the baby is born, I whispered, the pieces falling into place. He's waiting until then to minimize public judgment. There's more, Michael continued reluctantly. Mr. Carter and David Wright appear to be business partners in this venture. Mr. Wright has made similar transfers from accounts shared with his wife. I stared at him, momentarily stunned. David, Marcus's best friend since college. Best man at our wedding, godfather-to-be to our son. The conspiracy extended beyond Marcus to our closest social circle. A week after this revelation, Sarah called to invite me to lunch. We met at a quiet bistro near my office, her eyes red-rimmed behind large sunglasses. "Is everything okay?" I asked, maintaining my facade. Sarah glanced around before leaning forward. "David's been different lately. Secretive, working late. I found receipts." She trailed off. "I thought maybe Marcus might have mentioned something. They're so close." I reached across the table to squeeze her hand, my heart breaking at the genuine confusion in her eyes. I couldn't tell her what I knew. Not yet. Men can be mysterious. I said evasively, "Let's talk after the baby shower next week." The guilt of withholding information from Sarah weighed heavily, but I needed all my pieces in place before making any moves I'd learned from my mother's hasty emotional decisions during her divorce. That strategic patience often yielded better outcomes. By the time our baby shower arrived, I had a complete dossier assembled with Michael's meticulous help. I'd also consulted with Jade about my legal options, securing the services of Catherine Delgado, one of Chicago's most formidable divorce attorneys, who was briefed and ready to file paperwork immediately after my planned confrontation. The guest list included everyone significant in our lives: Marcus's parents, my family, our closest friends, colleagues from both our workplaces and the upper echelon of Chicago society, with whom the Carters maintained close ties. Eleanor had spared no expense transforming the lakeside gardens into a fairy tale setting with floral arrangements in soft blues and greens, crystal champagne flutes for the toasting, and a string quartet playing gentle classical music. Waitstaff circulated with gourmet appetizers while a professional photographer captured candid moments of the celebration. I wore a custom silk maternity dress in pale gold that emphasized my pregnancy while maintaining an elegant silhouette. Marcus stood proudly beside me, the picture of the devoted husband and father-to-be, his hand occasionally resting protectively on my lower back as we greeted guests. "You look beautiful," he whispered during a brief moment alone, kissing my cheek for the benefit of nearby observers. I smiled up at him, wondering if he detected anything unusual in my expression. "Thank you for being here. I know how busy you've been with the Henderson merger." Something flickered across his face, perhaps recognition of the specific excuse he'd used frequently, but his practiced smile never faltered. "I wouldn't miss this for anything. This baby and you are everything to me." The celebration proceeded according to Eleanor's carefully orchestrated timeline. Welcome drinks, games celebrating parenthood, a catered lunch, and now the moment for opening gifts before dessert. Guests gathered around the gift table beneath the pergola, champagne flutes refreshed for toasting the soon-to-arrive baby. William Carter, patriarch of the family, and spitting image of what Marcus would become in 30 years, stood to propose a toast. Distinguished in his tailored blazer, silver hair perfectly groomed, he raised his glass. To Marcus and Ava. He began voice-carrying across the garden with the authority of a man accustomed to boardrooms, continuing the Carter family legacy with a beautiful new addition. May he inherit his father's determination and his mother's creativity. Guests raised their glasses, smiling expectantly. This was my cue to begin opening gifts with appropriate exclamations of delight. Instead, I slowly rose from my seat, one hand supporting my belly. "Before we continue," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "I have a special gift of my own to share." The aftermath of my revelation unfolded with surprising swiftness. Eleanor and William, after reviewing the evidence in shocked silence, did something I hadn't dared hope for. They chose integrity over blood ties. "This is not the son we raised," William had said quietly. After examining the financial documents, Eleanor's hand had trembled on my shoulder, her eyes meeting mine with unexpected alliance. David and Sarah's marriage imploded in the garden that day, his attempted denials crumbling under the weight of evidence. Sarah's initial shock gave way to cold fury as she realized the depth of David's involvement in both the infidelity cover-up and financial scheming. Marcus, finding his carefully constructed world disintegrating around him, had alternated between rage and desperate attempts at damage control. You don't understand, he'd hissed when we were momentarily alone. This wasn't personal. It was just business, a contingency plan. So is this, I'd replied, handing him the divorce papers Catherine had prepared. 3 months later, I sat in my attorney's office reviewing the final divorce settlement. The process had moved with unusual speed, expedited by the comprehensive evidence the Carters' influence and Marcus's ultimate reluctance to contest the terms when faced with potential criminal charges for financial fraud. Marcus had fled to Florida with Vanessa, only to have her leave him within weeks when his financial deception became clear and his parents cut him off completely. Jessica had already distanced herself while Lauren had apparently been unaware of his marital status and issued a public apology to me on social media. The trust for your son is established, Catherine confirmed. William and Eleanor have been remarkably generous. The brownstone is fully yours, and the offshore funds have been recovered. Jade, who had joined me for moral support, squeezed my hand. I've never seen a divorce concluded so efficiently, she remarked. Usually these things drag on for a year, minimum. The evidence was irrefutable. Catherine replied, and no judge wanted to be seen siding with a man who defrauded his pregnant wife. That evening, sitting in the completed nursery, I felt my son kick vigorously. The nursery walls, painted with a mural of mountains and forests, represented the future I was building, one founded on truth rather than comfortable illusions. Eleanor called as I was finishing dinner. Our relationship had transformed from formal politeness to genuine connection through shared betrayal and subsequent rebuilding. We'd like to come visit next week, she said. William has some legal documents regarding your son's inheritance he wants to discuss. You're always welcome, I replied, genuinely meaning it. Sarah texted just after she'd decided to move back to Seattle, where her family lived. Fresh start. She wrote, but I'll be back for the birth. We strong women need to stick together. Later, standing by the window, watching the Chicago skyline illuminate against the evening sky, I placed both hands on my rounded belly. It's just us now, I whispered to my son. But we're surrounded by people who choose truth over comfort, integrity over convenience. That's the real inheritance I'm giving you, not money or position, but examples of courage when it matters most. The baby kicked in response, strong and determined. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in months. The future stretched before us, unwritten, but founded on truth. Painful truth that had ultimately set us free.